They say there are two types of death. The kind where your heart stops beating, and the kind where your children wish it would. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 79 years old, and according to the state of New York, I died on March 14, 2023. Problem is, nobody told me. I should start at the beginning, not the beginning of my death, the beginning of my daughter's betrayal. It started the day I turned 75. My daughter Victoria threw me a birthday party, a beautiful party at the country club in Greenwich, Connecticut. White roses everywhere, a live string quartet, 200 guests dressed in their finest. Victoria stood at the microphone in a cream silk dress that cost more than most people's cars and gave a toast. To my mother, she said, her voice trembling with what I thought was emotion. The strongest woman I know. The woman who taught me everything. The woman who built an empire from nothing and gave me the world. Everyone applauded. I cried. I actually cried. I thought it was the most beautiful moment of my life. I didn't know I was attending my own eulogy. Let me tell you who I am. Or rather, who I was before Victoria decided to erase me. I was born Eleanor May Hutchins in 1944 in rural Pennsylvania. My father was a coal miner. My mother took in laundry. We had nothing, but we had each other. When I was 17, my father died in a mine collapse. Black lung and a tunnel that shouldn't have been dug. The company gave us $500 and a letter of condolence. That's when I learned that poor people don't get justice. They get sympathy, and sympathy doesn't pay rent. I moved to New York City with $43 in my pocket. I got a job as a secretary at a real estate firm. I worked 12-hour days. I learned everything. How properties were valued. How deals were structured. How the rich stayed rich by buying what the poor had to sell. By the time I was 25, I had saved $11,000. I bought my first building, a rundown tenement in Brooklyn. I fixed it up myself. Painting, plumbing, electrical work. I rented out every unit, and I bought another building. By the time I was 40, I owned 37 buildings across 3 states. By the time I was 50, I owned 112. By the time I turned 70, I had a portfolio worth $640 million. I married once, a man named Richard Whitmore. He was kind. He was gentle. He died of a heart attack when Victoria was 12. And after that, it was just the two of us. I gave Victoria everything I never had. Private schools, piano lessons, summers in Europe. She went to Vassar, then Harvard Business School. I paid for all of it, in cash. I never wanted her to struggle the way I did. I wanted her to have choices. What I didn't realize was that I was teaching her to see me as an ATM instead of a mother. Victoria married well. A man named Preston Carmichael III. Old money. Trust funds. A last name that opened doors. They had 2 children. Twins. Charlotte and Sebastian. Beautiful children who called me Grandmother Eleanor in that crisp, formal way that rich children are taught. Victoria and Preston lived in a $12 million townhouse on the Upper East Side. I bought it for them as a wedding gift. I thought I was being generous. What I was actually doing was teaching my daughter that she didn't have to earn anything, that everything she wanted would simply appear, that I would always be there to write the check. The first crack appeared when I turned 75. Not at the party. After the party, Victoria came to my apartment the next day. I lived in a penthouse in Tribeca, 12,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. I had lived there for 20 years. It was my sanctuary. Victoria sat across from me in the living room, perched on the edge of an Italian leather chair like she was at a business meeting. "Mother," she began, and I noticed she was using her professional voice, the voice she used with clients, not with family. "Yes, darling," I said, pouring tea. "Preston and I have been talking," she said, crossing her legs and straightening her skirt. "About your future. About your care." Care. That word hung in the air like a threat. "I don't need care," I said. "I'm perfectly healthy. Dr. Morrison says I have the heart of a 60-year-old. Victoria smiled. It was the smile she used when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed. "Of course you're healthy, Mother, but you're also getting older." And with your assets, your portfolio, the complexity of your holdings. She paused. We think it would be wise to start planning. Estate planning. Succession planning. I have a will, I said. I know, Victoria said. But a will doesn't protect you while you're alive. What if something happens? What if you have a stroke? What if you become incapacitated? Incapacitated. Another word that felt like a weapon disguised as concern. I'm not incapacitated, Victoria. Of course not, she said quickly. But wouldn't it give you peace of mind to know that if something did happen, someone you trust would be able to step in, make decisions, protect your legacy? You want power of attorney, I said. Victoria's smile widened. Only as a precaution, Mother. You'd still control everything. I'd just be backup. Insurance. I should have said no. I should have seen the warning signs. But I didn't, because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and I wanted to believe she loved me too. So I signed the papers. Nothing changed immediately. For 6 months, life went on as normal. I managed my properties. I attended board meetings. I had dinner with Victoria and her family every Sunday. But then, small things started happening. My credit card stopped working. Victoria said it was a security measure. She'd get me new ones. She never did. My building manager stopped returning my calls. When I went to the office, they told me all property management decisions were now being handled by the new director. The new director was Victoria. My accountant stopped sending me monthly reports. When I called him, he said, Mrs. Whitmore, I've been instructed to send all financial documents to Miss Carmichael now. She has full access to the accounts. I called Victoria. What's going on? I asked. Nothing's going on, Mother, she said, her voice bright and dismissive. I'm just taking some things off your plate. You've worked so hard for so long. Don't you want to relax? Enjoy your life. I am enjoying my life, Victoria. And I want my accounts back. There was a pause. A long pause. And then Victoria said something that made my blood run cold. Mother, you don't have accounts anymore. You have power of attorney. I have the accounts. I hung up. I called my lawyer. Or rather, I tried to. But when I dialed his number, a recording said the line had been disconnected. I called his office. A receptionist answered. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, but Mr. Patterson is no longer representing you. Your legal affairs are now being handled by Miss Carmichael's firm. Victoria had fired my lawyer and hired her own. I sat in my apartment, staring out at the river, trying to understand what was happening. And then it hit me. She was erasing me. I decided to go to the bank. I would withdraw cash. I would hire a new lawyer. I would fix this. But when I tried to leave my building, the doorman stopped me. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, looking uncomfortable. I've been asked to inform you that you're not to leave the building without an escort. An escort? I said. Who gave that order? Miss Carmichael, ma'am. She said it's for your safety. You've been forgetting things, getting confused. I hadn't forgotten anything, and I certainly wasn't confused. I went back upstairs. I called Victoria. She didn't answer. I called Preston. He didn't answer. I called the twins. Their phones went straight to voicemail. I was being isolated. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 men in suits and a woman with a clipboard. Mrs. Whitmore, the woman said. I'm Dr. Helena Cross. I'm a neuropsychologist. Your daughter has requested a competency evaluation. I don't need an evaluation, I said. I'm fine. Of course, Dr. Cross said, smiling in that patronizing way doctors smile at elderly patients they've already decided are senile. This is just routine. Your daughter is concerned about some recent memory lapses. Confusion. We just want to make sure you're safe. I let them in. Not because I thought I needed an evaluation, but because I wanted to prove that I was fine. They asked me questions. What year is it? Who is the president? Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens? I answered every question correctly. But then Dr. Cross asked me something strange. Mrs. Whitmore, can you tell me what you had for breakfast this morning? I thought about it. I'd had oatmeal. with blueberries and coffee. But when I opened my mouth to answer, I realized I couldn't remember. Not because I was confused, but because I hadn't had breakfast. My refrigerator was empty. My housekeeper hadn't come in 3 days. And when I tried to order groceries, my credit cards didn't work. I hadn't eaten in 18 hours. I don't remember, I said. Dr. Cross wrote something on her clipboard. And Mrs. Whitmore, she continued, your daughter mentioned that you've been making some unusual financial decisions, transferring large sums of money, closing accounts. Do you remember doing that? I haven't transferred anything, I said. Victoria has been managing the accounts. Dr. Cross looked at the men in suits. They looked at each other, and I realized this wasn't an evaluation. This was a setup. They had already decided I was incompetent. They were just here to make it official. 3 days later, I received a court summons. Victoria was petitioning for full guardianship. The hearing was scheduled for March 10th. I tried to find a lawyer, but every firm I called said they had a conflict of interest. Victoria had already contacted them. She'd poisoned the well. On March 9th, the night before the hearing, I sat in my apartment and cried. I had built an empire, and my daughter was going to take it from me with the judge's signature. But then I remembered something. I didn't build my empire by giving up. I built it by being smarter than everyone else. I went to my study. In the back of my desk drawer, hidden under old tax returns, was a manila envelope. Inside that envelope was a key. The key to a safety deposit box at a bank in New Jersey. A bank Victoria didn't know about. A box I'd opened 30 years ago when Richard died. Inside that box was something Victoria had forgotten, or maybe something she never knew existed. A second will. You see, I'm not stupid. I've been poor. I've been powerless. And I swore I would never be either of those things again. When Richard died, I changed my estate structure. I didn't just have a will. I had a trust. A revocable living trust. And the trustee wasn't Victoria. It was my oldest friend, a woman named Margaret Chen, a woman Victoria had never met. Margaret was the daughter of Chinese immigrants. We'd worked together at the real estate firm in the 1960s. We'd built our fortunes together. She owned half of Brooklyn, and she owed me nothing, which meant Victoria couldn't control her. I called Margaret. She answered on the first ring. Eleanor, she said. I was wondering when you'd call. She's trying to bury me, Margaret. I know, Margaret said. I've been watching. Do you want me to stop her? Not yet, I said. Let her think she's won. And then we'll show her what losing really looks like. The hearing was a formality. Dr. Cross testified that I had significant cognitive decline. Victoria cried on the stand, saying how much she loved me and how hard this was. She was very convincing. I almost believed her myself. The judge granted full guardianship to Victoria, effective immediately. That afternoon, Victoria filed paperwork with the county. Paperwork that declared me legally incompetent. Paperwork that gave her control of everything I owned. And 4 days later, on March 14th, she filed one more document. A death certificate. I didn't know about it at first. I was sitting in my apartment under what Victoria called home care, which was really just house arrest. But Margaret knew, because Margaret had access to public records. And she called me. Eleanor, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Your daughter just declared you dead. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so audacious I couldn't believe it. How? I asked. Hospice paperwork. She told the county you died peacefully in your sleep. She filed a death certificate signed by a Dr. Morrison. Dr. Morrison, my cardiologist. The one who said I had the heart of a 60-year-old. Except it wasn't my Dr. Morrison. It was a different Dr. Morrison. A hospice Dr. Victoria had paid off. What happens now? I asked Margaret. Now, Margaret said. Now she inherits everything. The properties, the accounts, the portfolio. $640 million. She's already filing probate paperwork. She'll have everything liquidated in 6 months. I was silent for a long moment. Margaret, I said quietly. It's time. The next morning, Margaret filed paperwork with the court, not as my lawyer, as the trustee of the Eleanor Hutchins Irrevocable Trust, a trust that owned everything I had, a trust Victoria didn't know existed, a trust that couldn't be touched by guardianship, or death certificates, or any of Victoria's schemes. And then Margaret did something beautiful. She called the police, not to report Victoria for filing a false death certificate, though that would have been enough. She reported her for something much worse: embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. You see, the moment Victoria filed that death certificate, she started moving money. Lots of money, from accounts she thought I controlled. But I didn't control them. The trust did. And every transfer she made was a federal crime. The FBI showed up at Victoria's townhouse at 6 a.m. on March 21st. They arrested her in her silk pajamas on the front steps while her neighbors watched. They arrested Preston at his office. They froze every account. They seized the townhouse, the cars, the art, everything. And then Margaret did one more thing. She called a press conference. I watched it on television from my apartment. Margaret stood at a podium in front of 20 cameras and said, "Eleanor Whitmore is not dead. She is very much alive. And she has a message for her daughter." Then Margaret stepped aside, and I walked up to the podium. The room went silent. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," I said, looking directly into the camera. "I am 79 years old. I am not incompetent. I am not senile. And I am certainly not dead." I paused. Let that sink in. My daughter attempted to have me declared incompetent so she could steal my estate. When that wasn't fast enough, she declared me dead. She filed fraudulent paperwork. She forged documents. She embezzled funds. And she did all of this while telling people she loved me. "Victoria," I said, looking directly into the lens, "you wanted me buried. So let me tell you what it's like to be buried alive." The trial lasted 6 months. Victoria fought it. She hired the best lawyers money could buy. My money. Money she no longer had. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victoria was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Preston got 8. Dr. Cross lost her medical license. The fake Dr. Morrison went to prison for fraud. And I got my life back. But that's not the end of the story. Because Victoria had children. Charlotte and Sebastian. The twins. They were 18 when their mother went to prison. They came to see me. Not at my apartment. I'd sold that. Too many bad memories. They came to my new home. A smaller place. A townhouse in Brooklyn. The neighborhood where I started. Charlotte spoke first. "Grandmother," she said, and her voice was cold. "You destroyed our mother." "No," I said. "Your mother destroyed herself. I simply made sure she didn't destroy me too." Sebastian stepped forward. "She said she was trying to protect you, that you were sick, that you didn't know what you were doing." "I knew exactly what I was doing," I said. "And so did she. She didn't want to protect me. She wanted to erase me." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "We have nothing now. The house is gone. The money is gone. We had to drop out of college. We're living in a studio apartment in Queens." I looked at them. These children I'd bought toys for. These children I'd sent birthday checks to. These children who'd called me Grandmother Eleanor, with that formal, distant politeness. "Good," I said. Charlotte gasped. "What?" "Good," I repeated. "You're living in Queens. You're working. You're learning what it means to earn something instead of expecting it to be handed to you. That's the best gift I could ever give you." "You're punishing us for what our mother did," Sebastian said, his voice shaking with anger. "No," I said. "I'm teaching you what your mother never learned. That there are consequences. That you can't take what doesn't belong to you. That family isn't about blood. It's about respect." They left. Angry, bitter, broke. I didn't hear from them for 2 years. And then one day, Charlotte knocked on my door. She looked different, thinner, tired, but there was something else. Something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Strength. Grandmother, she said. I came to apologize. I let her in. We sat in my living room. I poured tea. I didn't understand, Charlotte said. When you said we needed to earn things, I thought you were being cruel. But you were right. I've been working. Really working. I'm a paralegal now. I'm going to law school at night. I'm paying my own tuition. I looked at her. This girl who'd grown up in a $12 million townhouse. This girl who'd never worked a day in her life until her mother went to prison. I'm proud of you, I said. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? She cried then. Not angry tears. Not bitter tears. Relief. I visited Mom in prison last month, Charlotte said quietly. She's still angry. She says you stole everything from her. She says she was only trying to help you. Your mother will never understand, I said, because she never had to build anything. She only knows how to take. Charlotte nodded. I know. She comes to visit me now. Once a month. She brings Sebastian sometimes. He's working too. Learning carpentry. Building things with his hands. And me? I'm 79 years old. I'm alive. I'm free. And I'm no longer the wealthiest woman in New York. You see, I gave most of it away. To scholarships. To charities. To people who are building empires from nothing the way I once did. I kept enough to live comfortably. But I don't need 12,000 square feet and a view of the Hudson. I need a home. And this townhouse in Brooklyn, with its creaky floors and small kitchen, feels more like home than the penthouse ever did. Because I learned something through all of this. You can't take your money with you, but you can take your dignity. You can take your strength. You can take the knowledge that you didn't let anyone bury you alive. Victoria gets out of prison in 6 years. She's written me letters. Apologies. Explanations. Promises that she's changed. I haven't opened them. Because some betrayals are too deep to forgive. And some lessons are too important to forget. She wanted me dead. And in a way she killed me. The old me. The woman who believed family was everything. The woman who thought love could conquer greed. But what she didn't understand was that I've died before. I died when my father was crushed in that mine. I died when Richard had his heart attack. I died every time someone told me I couldn't do something because I was poor, or a woman, or too old. And every time I came back stronger. So yes, Victoria buried me. But she forgot the most important rule of all. You should never bury someone who's already learned how to rise from the dead. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 79 years old, and I am very much alive. And that is the greatest revenge of all. They say the most dangerous person in the room is the one who says nothing while everyone else is shouting. My name is Matilda. I am 82 years old, and for 3 long years I was the invisible woman in a house I built with my own sweat, blood, and tears. My son Julian calls it the estate. I call it home. Julian married a woman named Tiffany. Tiffany is 34, smells of expensive French perfume, and has never had a single callus on her hands in her life. She treats people like furniture, things to be moved, polished, or discarded when they no longer fit the aesthetic of her perfect life. I was the piece of furniture she wanted to discard most of all. When my husband died, he left everything to me. The construction groups, the real estate holdings, and the 40-acre property we called the Thorne Estate. But Julian was struggling. He wanted to be a developer like his father, but he had the ambition without the backbone. So, being a mother, I stepped back. I let him move into the main house with his new bride. I moved into the small gardener's cottage at the edge of the property. I thought I was giving him a leg up. I thought I was teaching him how to manage a legacy. Instead, I was giving him a shovel to bury me with. It started with the invitation. One rainy Tuesday, Tiffany walked across the wet grass to my cottage. She didn't take off her designer boots. She just stood in my small living room and looked around with a look of pure pity. "Matilda," she said, her voice dripping with artificial honey, "Julian and I have been so worried. This cottage. It's so drafty. So isolated. What if you fell? What if you needed us in the middle of the night? I've lived here for 50 years, Tiffany, I replied. I know every floorboard that creaks. I know, she said, waving a manicured hand. But we want you in the big house. We've prepared a beautiful space for you. It's close to everything. You'll never be lonely again. What she didn't tell me was that the beautiful space was a windowless room in the staff wing, right next to the laundry room and the service entrance. I moved in. I told myself it was for the best. But within a month, the help began to vanish. The cook quit. The housekeeper was fired. The gardener was let go. It's so hard to find good people these days, Tiffany would complain over breakfast while I poured her coffee. Matilda, since you're already up, would you mind just putting the roast in? Just this once. Just this once turned into every night. Light tidying turned into scrubbing the marble foyer on my hands and knees while they slept upstairs. I became the ghost in the machine. I wore a gray uniform because Tiffany said it was more practical for the work I was doing. When their wealthy friends came over for dinner, I was instructed to stay in the kitchen. They wouldn't understand, Matilda, Julian told me once, unable to look me in the eye. It would be awkward to explain why my mother is the one serving the soup. Then stop me from serving it, Julian, I said quietly. He didn't answer. He just turned his back and walked away. That was the day I realized my son didn't just want my help. He wanted my disappearance. For 2 years, I watched them spend my money. They bought a yacht they never used. They filled the house with art they didn't understand. And they treated me like a servant who was lucky to have a bed. The tension reached its breaking point on the night of the Founders Gala. Tiffany had invited 60 of the most powerful people in the county. I had been on my feet for 14 hours. I had cooked the 5-course meal, polished every piece of silver, and ironed the linen napkins. At 6 p.m., I sat down at the kitchen table for just 5 minutes. My legs were shaking. My chest felt tight. Tiffany walked in, a vision in gold silk. She looked at me sitting there and her face twisted in disgust. Matilda, what are you doing? She snapped. The appetizers need to be plated. You look a mess. Your hair is coming loose. If a guest walks in here and sees you like this, it will ruin everything. I am 82 years old, Tiffany. I am tired. I need 10 minutes. You have 0 minutes, Tiffany shouted. Julian and I provide you with a roof over your head. We pay for your food. The least you can do is show some gratitude by doing your job. Now get up. Or tomorrow, I'll have Julian sign the papers for that home in the valley. The one with the shared rooms and the plastic sheets. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see a daughter-in-law. I saw a predator who had forgotten who the alpha was. I'll plate the appetizers, Tiffany, I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. Good, she said, checking her reflection in the stainless steel fridge. And stay out of sight. I told everyone you were away in Europe for your health. I didn't plate the appetizers. I didn't serve the wine. I walked out the service entrance. I walked across the lawn to the gardener's cottage. I went to the floorboard I told Tiffany about, the one that creaked. Pried it up. Inside was a satellite phone and a leather-bound ledger. I called my lead attorney, a man I'd known since Julian was in diapers. A man Julian thought was retired. Matilda? The voice on the other end said. Is it time? It's time, Edward. Execute the sunset clause. All of them. Every single one. You see, I'm not just an old woman with a broom. I'm the founder of Matilda's Holdings. Julian was the president in name only. He was an employee. And Tiffany? Tiffany was a guest. The sunset clause was a legal trigger I had built into the estate plan 40 years ago. It stated that if the primary residence was ever used to degrade or devalue the family legacy, the ownership immediately reverted to a private charitable trust. At 8 p.m., while the guests were drinking my vintage champagne, 3 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. 6 men in tactical gear and 3 lawyers in sharp suits entered the foyer. They weren't there for the party. I walked into the dining room. I wasn't wearing the gray apron. I was wearing the gold silk dress Tiffany had bought for herself, The one I had ironed for her just 3 hours ago. The room went silent. Julian's face turned the color of ash. "Mother," he stammered, his glass shaking in his hand. What? What are you doing in that dress?" "I'm wearing it better than she ever could, Julian," I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. Tiffany stepped forward, her voice a screech. "Matilda, get out of here. This is a private event. Someone call security." "Security is already here, Tiffany," I said, gesturing to the men by the door. "But they aren't here for me. They're here to escort you and my son off the premises. You have 30 minutes to pack a single suitcase each. Everything else in this house, the art, the cars, the jewelry, was purchased with Matilda's Holdings funds. And those funds have been frozen." The guests began to scramble. They left like rats from a sinking ship. Julian fell to his knees. "Mom, please. We have nowhere to go. I haven't paid the taxes on my personal accounts. I thought you were handling it." "I was handling it, Julian, until you told me I was too old to live in my own home." Tiffany tried to slap me. A security guard caught her arm before she even got close. She was hysterical, screaming about her rights and her social standing. "Your standing was built on my back, Tiffany," I said, standing up. "Now you're going to find out what it's like to stand on your own 2 feet." They were gone by midnight. I sat in the grand dining room alone, eating a piece of the turkey I had cooked myself. But I didn't leave them with nothing. I'm not a monster. I'm a mother. I gave them a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they used to mock. A place where the walls are thin and the neighbors work 3 jobs to survive. I also gave them a job. I bought a small cleaning franchise in the city. I made Julian the manager and Tiffany the head of field operations. They spend their days scrubbing floors now. They spend their nights realizing that light tidying is a lot harder when it's your only source of income. Julian calls me every Sunday. He doesn't talk about the estate anymore. He talks about how hard it is to get the smell of bleach off his skin. He talks about how much he misses my cooking. "I'm glad you're staying active, Julian," I tell him, and then I hang up, and I walk out onto my 40-acre property, breathing in the sea air that I earned. You should never underestimate an old woman with a broom, because once she finishes sweeping the floors, she just might sweep you right out of her life. My name is Matilda. I am 82 years old, and I am finally home.